Congress is on summer break, and that's giving one representative an opportunity to ramp up his campaign for higher office. Dallas area Congressman Colin Allred hopes to challenge Ted Cruz in next year's race for U.S. Senate. Allred just started a statewide campaign tour, and he spoke with Capitol correspondent Ryan Chandler about his message to voters.
Congressman Allred, thank you so much for joining us. You are running to unseat Ted Cruz in the 2024 election. Congressman, it has been decades since a Democrat won statewide in Texas. Why do you believe your campaign is the one to end that streak?
Well, I think we know as Texans that we can't afford 6 more years of Ted Cruz. We know who Ted Cruz is. He's somebody who is always looking out for himself. He's somebody who we can't count on in a crisis. What I think this election is going to be about is who are we as Texans? Because the truth is we don't have to be embarrassed by our senator. We can get a new one. And I have a record of running in tough races and telling what I think is a unique story about growing up in this state, understanding who we are, being raised by a single mother, going to public school, making it to Baylor, making it to the NFL, becoming a civil rights lawyer, and ultimately being in Congress. And I believe that in this election, we're going to reject the divisiveness of Ted Cruz.
We know the eyes of the nation are on Texas right now, specifically on the Rio Grande on our southern border. You tweeted just a couple days ago that we need to avoid the rhetoric that Ted Cruz is using when describing the border and use, quote, common sense solutions to find common ground in an immigration policy. What does common sense border policy look like to you? What does that mean?
Well, I just was in El Paso visiting with our Border Patrol and going to the border and hearing about some of the issues that are going on there. And listen, I just reject this idea that we either have to act in an inhumane way or go against our values in a way that I think is inconsistent with who we are as Texans and Americans. That the idea that that's the only way for us to have border security, that's just not true. Border security is made up of many different things, and we do need more personnel at the border, but we also need to allow those personnel to do their job and not be spending all their time processing claims. And so we have to have a comprehensive reform that addresses all of the needs of our economy through our immigration system that also secures our border. We actually know that we have a framework that we know will work. We've seen that in the Obama administration and the Bush administration frameworks around comprehensive reforms that have passed. Veronica Escobar has put forward a bill that I am a co-sponsor of that I think is also a very good bipartisan framework to try and get something done. Both sides will have to give a little bit in terms of getting this done, but I think Texans and our economy demand that we get it done.
Firearms, Congressman, are also bound to be a huge issue in this race, not just from Ted Cruz, but of course your primary opponent has made that a sticking point of his political career, especially after the tragedies that we've seen in Texas recently. If you are a United States Senator, what kind of firearm regulations or policy will you advocate for in the Senate?
Well, I have a record already in the United States Congress of advocating for what I think are common sense measures to try and reduce gun violence consistent with protecting the Second Amendment. We, I think, as Texans have a long tradition of responsible gun ownership. I grew up driving down to Brownsville where my grandmother lived, seeing folks with shotguns in the back of their truck. We understand how to be responsible around firearms, but that also means that there have to be some limitations in terms of how do we keep it out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have it. The universal background checks is something that we have to get done. We've made some step forward in terms of in the last Congress with the Safer Communities Act that Senator Cornyn helped push in the Senate and that I helped push in the House. And we did, for the first time in 30 years, have some legislation to reduce gun violence. But this is another case where it's just not true, this kind of political narrative, that we either can have nothing in place at all to do anything about all of our hallmarks of our communities potentially becoming the site of the next mass shooting, or that we are going to do something that's inconsistent with the Second Amendment. There is another way, and we know what it is, and most Texans and most Americans support it.
All right, Congressman Allred, we really appreciate your time. We'll see you out there on the campaign trail.
Okay, thanks so much.
Senator Ted Cruz says he has been working towards solutions on gun violence. Cruz told Dallas politics reporter Phil Prazen that he's sponsored bills to increase funding for mental health programs.
Every parent is worried about this, and I got to say, the school shootings we've seen, they're unbelievably horrific. I had been to too damn many of these. So many of these school shootings are a deranged, typically young man, teenage boy who's alienated, who has real mental illness. And if we could intervene early with mental health treatment, maybe we could stop someone before they commit some unspeakable crime.
Senator Cruz said he's also sponsored legislation to add more police officers in school. Allred has emphasized his campaign against Ted Cruz, but first he has to win the Democratic nomination in the March primary. State Senator Roland Gutierrez is also on the ballot. After Gutierrez announced his campaign, our Monica Madden asked him about running against Allred.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure he's a very nice person, but he's, no disrespect to him, but he's not my opponent. My opponent is Ted Cruz. We're going to win the primary and we're going to win the general. We're going to win it because people are going to understand how hard we've worked, how hard I'm willing to work, and my whole life is based on that value. I'll outwork Colin Allred and I'll outwork Ted Cruz, and we'll have a discussion on what is really matters to people. And it's those kitchen table politics. It's how much money you can save if you had a real Medicaid expansion proposition, if you had universal health care even. Those are proposals that we need to be talking about and ensuring for Americans.
Senator Cruz's campaign issued a response after Gutierrez joined the race, criticizing both Democrats in the primary. A spokesman said Texans will now get to watch Colin Allred and Roland Gutierrez slug it out for who can be the most radical leftist in the state.
We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. This is Texans' money that we're talking about.
New developments from our investigation into text tag troubles. Our team uncovers missing reports on companies operating the toll system getting paid by Texas taxpayers.